Hey, everybody. In today's episode, it's myself, Dr. T, and Erik. Now, if you've been following me on social media, you may have seen Erik's reels. He's got a big, long goatee. I'll tell you what, this guy can capture an audience. He has a way with words, and he knows the big book better than anybody I've ever met in my entire life. And I've had a lot of conversations with people in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Starting on January 6th, we're starting a big book study that's going to be live that we want you to be a part of. And in this episode, we go deep into why this is so important. Erik gets a little bit into the book to give you an example of what to expect every Monday starting January 6th at 5 o'clock. He breaks this book down in ways that you probably don't understand. The book in and of itself is written in 1939. Erik puts it in a way that is going to be relatable to you. Now, this isn't for just alcoholics. This is for family members, loved ones, anybody that's been affected by addiction and alcoholism in any sort of capacity. This is something that you want to be a part of. So we wanted to record a podcast on this to give you a glimpse of what to expect. Again, he's one of the best communicators I've ever met in my life. So again, this starts January 6th, 5 o'clock Eastern. Go to realrecoverytalk.com/bigbookstudy to register for it. It's 100% free. We're not charging anything for this. In fact, we can't charge anything for this, but we want this message to get out to as many people as humanly possible. Take a listen to this episode and decide for yourself if you want to be a part of this. Enjoy the show. Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we've got Dr. T.
Hello, everyone.
And we have Erik. Erik, how are you, sir?
I'm doing really good. Glad to be here.
First things first, thank you for tuning in on the podcast app, whichever one that you choose to use. And thank you for watching on YouTube in the end. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach us. info@realrecoverytalk.com. Again, that's info@realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message, right, peeps?
That's right.
That's it.
Erik, first time on the old cast of pods, eh?
Yes, in this format, absolutely.
Well, we
I like
have, yeah, I'm glad that you're on here. And Dr. T, how are you?
Good.
Your socks, are they dirty or are they designed that way?
Get with the trends, Thomas.
Dirty
They're
sock looking?
Tie-dye socks.
Oh, okay. Looks like you got like maybe a grease spill on them or something.
You're such an old man.
I mean, doesn't it look like that, Erik, kind of?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, like maybe some bacon grease spilled down your pant leg.
Something coming through.
Yeah. Or yeah, maybe. Maybe you have some sort of skin infection.
Maybe.
And the blood is pussing through your socks.
I'm sorry, I'm trendy.
Careful when you take your socks off because that'll pull the scabs off.
Gross.
Thanks, Erik, for coming on the show. Hey, listen, we're excited. The reason Erik is on the show today is because we have an announcement to make, and this is something that we've been putting together probably over the past month, and so we're here to discuss this. Dr. T, why don't you be the one to tell us what's going on?
So, starting in January.
January 6th?
Okay, sorry, January 6th.
Yep.
We are collaborating with Erik, and we're going to go through the big book, which is Alcoholics Anonymous. And Erik is probably one of the best speakers I think I've ever heard speaking on the subject. And he has so much knowledge to give and to people in recovery, people struggling currently with addiction, to family members and loved ones. And it's an all-encompassing group, and I think everyone can learn from it. And we're going to have, it's once a week, right? Like
every Monday.
Every
yeah.
Monday. It's going to be a live stream, but we will also record it so people can go back and look at the recordings. And they can see, we're going to go through the book, correct?
Yep.
And Erik's
line
by line, and break it down and have open conversation. And there'll be a way for people to ask questions live that we will be responding to engage conversation and develop more of our community that we have already established.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the things that there's a couple areas in which I want to touch when it comes to this, but let me get the homework part of it out of the way. If this is something that you're interested in, you have to register for this. Go to realrecoverytalk.com/big book study. And I do want to say this is 100% free. We're not charging anything for this. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We are, doing it Mondays at 5 p.m. Eastern time. Erik could be at home with his family. I could be at home with my family. Dr. T could be at home with her family. But the reason we chose 5 is because it seems to be the most convenient time for everybody else. So it is free. Go to realrecoverytalk.com/big book study to register. All you have to do is put your email in, and then you'll get put in an email chain, and we're not going to bombard you with emails. Don't worry about that. But you will get reminders as time gets closer. So, you really have a solid 6 weeks to, coordinate. And it's not something that you have to come to every single week. Obviously, we're going to have the recordings and stuff like that, but we'll get more to it as we go. Erik, first question for you.
Yeah.
Why do you feel like it's so important to break this book down? I'll tell you my experience with the book when I first laid hands on it or laid eyes on it. I picked the book up, I read it cover to cover, I closed the book, and I put it away. Come to find out, that wasn't really, it was okay that I did that, but I didn't understand what I read. Let's get into that first.
So let me preface that by, you've heard me say before, there's a in the Library of Congress, there's a display of the 88 books that shaped America. And that display of book, that list of books goes all the way back to 1776. This book is numbered in those 88 books that shaped America. Of all the books that's pretty important.
Mm-hmm.
So what's in it? What's in it, right? And when I read it, I could get an academic to teach me this book. I can get a professor to teach me his book. It'll do me very little good. I needed a man that had an experience with how this shaped his life, who was an alcoholic like me, right? And showed me how this worked in his life from his experience. And so that's what I do with this book. I teach it from my experience. I learned this book by taking men through it. The first time I read it, it was, it's not written in the old King's English. I could understand it. I hear people say that all the time. They say, yeah, when I came in, this was like Chinese to me. I didn't understand a word of it. It's not my experience. I'm a well-read man. I could understand every word in it. I just wasn't buying it. How is that going to help me? What does this have to do with me staying sober when I read it, right? But when I sat down with a man who I knew had taken a flamethrower to his life, I knew he drank the way I did, drugged the way I did, hurt people the way I did, and I sat down with that man. He took me through this book, and I could see these 12 steps that are in here carved out in his life. I could see those 9-step promises that are in this book that had come to fruition in that man's life. Well, now I had hope. That was actually my step 2. That's the power greater than myself that I came to believe in before I developed a relationship with God. And had I not had that man who could break this book down to me, who knows where I'd be right now.
So when he started breaking that book down to you, how did he do it? Like with you? Like give us like tangible specifics on, because you shared with me before recording that you're going to break this book down via, obviously we're going to have the cameras and everything, but you're going to break the book down the same exact way that you've broken it down for other people, and that I'm assuming it was broken down for you.
Right. So when they use, they'll use specific examples in this book, and I will take that example into what it looked like for me. Like one of them is when a man, when we come to with that terrible remorse and feeling of after a spree, when we wake up and feeling remorseful and apologetic, and we have to go out, and how that worked in my life was waking up in the morning and just laying there thinking, what did I do last night? It says we emerge remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. That's a quote from the book. And for me, that was emerging, coming to in the morning after a spree or whatever, and laying there and thinking, what did I do? I can't believe I did that to her. I can't believe I broke the TV. Oh my God, I yelled at, I got into that fight with my son. I've got it. And now I'm laying there and I've got to go, and I'm laying there and I'm horrified. I'm horrified as the memories are coming to me. And I know that there's a broken TV out in the family room. I know that I said horrible things to my son, right? And now I've got to lay there and I've got to go out with it says with a firm resolution not to do it again, not to drink again. And that's me laying there and going out and begging them. I promise, please, I'll go to rehab. I'll never do this again. I'll quit drinking forever. And I mean it. You could give me a lie detector test at that moment. I meant it. But I couldn't. And it says after that, firm resolution not to do it again. And this is repeated over and over and over. That's a direct quote from the book. And unless he can find a power greater than himself, he has very little hope of recovery. That's from this book. And that was me. I'd go out there with a firm resolution not to do it again. I'm sorry. Please, I promise I'll never do it again. Over and over and over. And I held them hostage. In every relationships, I had hostages. I held them hostage for years with the idea that, no, I'm going to do it this time. And they believe me. That's where that paragraph in those two simple lines in that book, that's how it looks like for me. And that's what I could relate to when he broke down what they're talking about there and how it related to him. I could say, yeah, that's me. That is absolutely me. Book written in 1939. How did they know me? And that's really what it is.
So when going back to what you were saying, waking up in the morning, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I woke up in the morning thinking, I ain't ever doing that again. I'm not going to, and finding my car crashed out in the driveway and my dad reminding me all the things that I said and that I did, and my friends sending me the videos. And so many times I woke up in the morning vowing not to drink that day and never drinking again. But I always did. So family members, loved ones, you could probably relate to this in the sense that you're on the receiving end of that. You have an Erik in your life. You have a me in your life. And you've heard this. You've heard the promises and all the things that they're going to do differently and how it's going to be different this time, only to be let down time and time and time again. That is one of the reasons why it's so important for not only your loved one to know this book, but for you to know this book. Because then you'll have answers. You'll come out of this week after week with clarity, understanding, oh, that's why he did this. That's why she did this. Let's go into some of the chapters in the book, because there's specific chapters in here outlined for the families.
Oh, absolutely.
For the employers, for the wives. Yeah. Let's go into that a little bit.
So they're named that. We call those the Al-Anon chapters. They're the 3 of the final 4 chapters. It starts with 2 wives, and then the family after. The family after what? They're talking about the family after recovery. So you come home from working this program, you get back into you integrate back into the family. And then there's 2 employers, right? And then after that is a vision for you. But people, those 3 chapters there, 2 wives, the family after, and 2 employers. Granted, this was written in 1939. That family that they're talking about doesn't really exist today. It's a different, it talks about when father comes home as the head of the household. It's very dated. So how do I make that relevant to today? And what I can do, what those 3 chapters really do, is they teach me, the alcoholic, what not to do when I go home, right? And it also teaches the family what to expect. A much better expectation. How many times we know from working in the field do patients go home and the family just expects that they're better? Well, why do you have to go to all those meetings? Well, why do you have to spend time? What do you mean you have to sponsor guys? What about, the family wants to put together something that's been broken over the matter of years and wants to make up for that lost time. And it's a trap. Personally, for me, and I share this experience all the time. When I was 6 or 7 months sober when my son, I built the relationship back with my own son, something that I had damaged what I thought was just horribly. And that's what we want. We come in here and we just want our families back. We want to, we're so distraught of what we've done. And I had that back, but I had to cancel things with him because I was so involved in this program, because my sponsor told me, you need to be in the middle of this. You need to take service commitments. You need to sponsor guys. You need to, and I was holding true to those commitments, and I would have to not necessarily break plans, but I wasn't as available as my son would have wanted me to, and rightfully so. I can understand where he was coming from, but one day I got a message from him that said, Dad, when you were drinking and drugging, you were putting everything before me. You might be sober now, but you're still doing it. And I was devastated. I had done everything they told me to do. I'm sober and I'm losing this relationship with my son again. How did this happen? I wanted to throw this book away. I wanted to cancel my commitments, the meetings I was chairing. I wanted to move down to be closer, and all this because I was panicking that I was losing this relationship. And my sponsor said, you do that and you're going to be out there drinking within no time. And I didn't. And I kept messaging him and things, he'd send me back the one word, greetings. And then he called me, he messaged me on my 1-year anniversary. I don't know how he remembered it. I remember him saying to me, Dad, what are you doing to celebrate your 1 year? And I remember saying, well, I don't want to really celebrate it. It's 365 days. I need 366 to be where I want to be right now. Right. And he said, well, it's a really big deal to me, Dad. And today, if I have to break plans and because somebody needs my help or I have a commitment to do, go, Dad, go ahead. I'll see you later. Because he knows that without this, he doesn't have any of me. And those are the pitfalls that we run into in early sobriety. And 2 wives, the family after, that addresses all that. It's literally to the family, and how we're going to be. And if we, if more families asked us that, if more families said, what do we expect when they come home? And we could manage those expectations or teach them about this, that, hey, he walked 7 miles in the woods. He's walking 7 miles out. It's not going to be an overnight thing,
Tammy, anything up to this point?
It's for anyone that's ever questioned, their family member or loved one about, what they're doing, why they're doing, we'll never 100% know those answers. But I think listening to you speak and you going over this and breaking it down one by one, I think they'll have a better understanding and be better able to handle what's happening in their life, and to be able to learn that they can also help themselves with this. They will get answers and they will be more knowledgeable. And I think even for myself, like for a healthcare professional, for people who work in the field who've never read the book or even, sat through a meeting, I think it's a really great thing. Yeah. And I think it's going to do really great things for people.
We did a podcast episode, you and I, not long ago. I forget what episode it was, but I referenced a study that was done by Stanford Medical. Mm-hmm. And this study was in particular, spoke highly on the effectiveness of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it pretty much being not far superior. I don't want to put words in the study's mouth, but it was better. Mm-hmm. The outcomes were better in Alcoholics Anonymous than any form of talk therapy or, all the things that people would generally gravitate to. Like, I need to get sober, so I'm going to go get a therapist. I need to get sober, so I'm going to start going to church or, all that stuff. But yet, not a lot of people, unless you are an alcoholic, not a lot of people understand or even know about the book. So here, I got a question for you. The family afterwards, to the wives, that's great. That addresses when they come home or when they're in recovery or when they're starting to kind of dip their toe into AA. But what about when they're in the thick of it?
So this is a spiritual program of action.
What do you mean by that?
It means it's a 12 step. It's laid out 12 steps that will bring about the whole purpose of this program and the purpose of this book is to affect a spiritual experience significant enough to bring about a complete psychic change. Psychic change is an improved shift in thought and behavior. How many times do we say it? Yeah, we see that person starting to move different.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an improved shift. It's not a 180 all of a sudden. Some people it might be, but it's that improved shift that comes about through the process of those 12 steps. And those 12 steps are not unique to Alcoholics Anonymous. You can take almost any religion known to mankind, you boil it down, you get those 12 steps come out of the bottom. Don't be a selfish, you know what, help one another, hold each other up, love one another.
Admit your wrongs.
Yes, take away the step one. Every other Al-Anon uses the same 12 steps, just not step one. It's different because they're not alcoholics. That's it. The whole program works on the age-old principle that man can only help himself by helping others, that it's in giving that we receive, that it's in teaching that we learn, which is why we sponsor men. It's in that helping another person. I'm uniquely positioned to do that. People go around the world on mission trips to help people. They're bringing them to me on vans. Because of my alcoholism and my subsequent recovery, right? So the family reading this will benefit from this 12 spiritual principles. Take away the drugs and the alcohol. Forget it's a problem. Who doesn't want to be a better person? These 12 steps make me a better husband, a better father, a better friend, brother, son, employee, boss, you name it. It makes me a better human being. Who doesn't want to be a better human being? When you read the principles, and they have them on the wall, principles like courage, brotherly love, honesty, integrity. You hear people oftentimes say, integrity is to do the right thing no matter who's looking. It's a pretty shallow interpretation of it. Really, it's to do the right thing no matter the personal cost. It often comes at a high personal cost. Do it anyways.
Give an example of that.
Losing the job, losing the wife, whatever, because you're doing the right thing, right? So not lying at work for somebody, and even though you might have to lose your job, not doing something that goes against your moral principles, even though your job wants you to, or coming clean about something, even though you might lose. Like when I came home, when the alcoholic who comes home who's done his ninth step, making those amends and has to be honest about things, even at the cost of losing his wife, maybe. Right? It means do the right thing no matter the personal cost, man. It's then who cares who's looking? Doesn't matter, right? You can hold your head up and you say, yeah, no, my feet match my mouth, right? And so it's when I say spiritual program of action, look, and it's not a religious program at all. It's a spiritual program. Big difference. There's plenty of men and women of God in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Priests, Catholic, Presbyterian, whatever. But they're flat on their back nevertheless. They're in Alcoholics Anonymous nevertheless, right? And I heard a Catholic priest say one time, he said, look, if I'd have come in here and you guys would have told me I just had to let go and let God, he said, I would have said, fantastic. And I would have gone home, and with my hands at my side, I would have said, okay, God, I'm now ready to let you make me sober. He said, I would have died a drunk because God's not going to come down and do a fourth and fifth step for me and show me who I really am. God's not going to come down here and do an eighth and a ninth step to me and actually help me mend the relationships in my life, bring justice to the wrongs that I've done. God's not going to do that. I'm doing that through a spiritual program of action. Somewhere in that process, I found a God of my understanding. So when I say spiritual experience, look, I've had multiple spiritual experiences in my life. I think we all have. The day that my son was born, I was in the room when he was born. I watched life that I created be brought into this world. It made me question, wonder, think about God, God's universe, and my place in it, right? That's a spiritual experience. The first time I went scuba diving, really every time I go, and I see that world under there, inner space, it makes me question, wonder, think about God, God's universe, and my place in it. Neither of those two spiritual experiences were enough to make me stop objectifying women, to make me stop robbing, stealing, fist fighting, drinking, drugging. This one was. And I believe that it was because for the first time in my life, I saw myself through the fourth and fifth step. I saw myself the way the world saw me. And I was never able to do that before. So that's when I say a spiritual program of action, that's what I mean. I took action that brought about that psychic change. And it's meticulously laid out in this book. It's not hey, we think that this is what's going to happen if you give it a try. Maybe do 8 of them and not all 12 of them. And no, it's not that. It is precisely laid out. And for me, and my experience with this program is it's not hit or miss. You do the work in here, you will get the same results I did. Talk about this all the time because you hear, especially working in this field, we hear statistics. Right? This is a statistic, and my experience makes me think those statistics are accurate. But who makes those statistics? We do. The alcoholics and the drug addicts trying to get better. We make the statistic. Right? It's not like we come into rehab and someone's going, okay, you're going to be in this statistic and you're going to be over here. No, we make it. And I guarantee you that the ones who make it, 99.9% of them that do this work will be in the statistic that stays sober. That does the work, not sits in a meeting, not, does 8 steps and doesn't sponsor people. I'm talking about really does this work the way it's laid out in here. Not the way somebody told you to do it, then doesn't open this book with you and show you exactly how it's laid out in here. And the reason why I do this big book study and why it's so important is there's words in here that we know what they mean, but they're not being used. They meant something different in 1939. And in that case, you look up the dated definition of that word to understand why they're using it the way they used it. This is a manual to stay sober. It is an absolute manual. And what a manual does is it takes words in this book and puts them into your brain. That's how you learn the manual. If you don't understand the words and what it's saying, you're not getting the information. And that's what so easily happens when you just breeze through this. You think you understand, but you're not quite grasping the significance of what they're saying here.
Right. Correct me if I'm wrong, but back before, if we go back at the birth of Alcoholics Anonymous, didn't they mail these books out to people?
Well, there was no book. The first 100, the book came later. So the 12 steps, when it says it's written, that's referring to what the first 100 did.
Right.
So like this book was authored by Bill W.
Yeah.
But it was edited and approved by the other 100. So it's not just, it's not like this is just one guy's idea that he did and he stayed sober. So as far as did they mail them out, I'm not sure about that, but I know that when this book was launched, as Bill W. says, on the world tide of alcoholism, people went and they bought it and they read it and they did it and they still had a very high success rate staying sober. There were very few meetings, no such thing as sponsorship. They read the book. They went after it. They wanted it. And they were able to stay sober from it.
Can you give us an example in the book? Like take maybe a sentence or two somewhere in the first 167, just because I want people to get like a general idea as to what this is going to look like starting on January 6th.
So like read something and break it down. Yeah, let me find something here. I'll start in the beginning and the doctor's opinion, which is actually not in one. So it's 1 through 164 is the text, but it also includes the doctor's opinion in the beginning, which starts on page XXV of the which is Roman numeral 15. I didn't know that before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. but
XXV, that's 25.
Well, apparently I still don't know it then.
Yeah, close, but
so let me find this here. I know this isn't my book, which is all marked up. So I'm gonna.
Is that Ben's book?
It's just
it's our prop book.
Oh, and, community book.
Community book, yeah.
Yeah, so I will give you
Ben.
An example here. So I'll read this paragraph. We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy. that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. Those allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. I only know one form of alcohol, and that's liquid. What do you think they're talking about here? I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. I can never put a mind or mood altering substance in my body again, or I'll have to be stopped. That's what it's telling me right here. In any form at all, right? And it goes on, it says, and once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. So let's break that down. Once having formed a habit and found they cannot break it. Look, we didn't just bump into each other in a room of Alcoholics Anonymous. You're there or you're in rehab because you've tried to stop. I didn't come in here because I had a bad weekend. I came in here because I had a bad 2.5 decades, man. I tried to stop in that time. So once having formed a habit and found you cannot break it, having lost your self-confidence. Anybody fly in here on the wings of victory? Feeling real good about yourself when you come in? No, you don't. Not that I know of. I've never heard one person come back in here and say, yeah, it was great out there. I'm just seeing what you guys are doing. No. They're drinking themselves to death and they can't stop. Having formed a habit and found I cannot break it, having lost their self-confidence, they feel this big because I'm drinking myself to death and I can't stop and I don't know why. Formed a habit and found they cannot break it, having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human. I'm drinking myself to death. I can't stop. I feel this big about myself and no one can help me. The doctor can't help me. My wife can't help me. The judge can't help me. Kids can't help me. My boss can't help me. I've lost my reliance upon things human. Their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. Astonishing to who? Not to me. I'm not even really worried about it, but to everyone around me. It's me on Monday morning going, hey man, to my boss, can you give me $20 for lunch? My boss going, I just paid you on Friday. What do you need money for? Oh, I had to pay my insurance and I spent it. Or me not being able to drive the work van next week because my license is suspended because I didn't pay my insurance. My wife's going, what do you mean? I pay you every week, man. How come why didn't you pay your insurance? And all these things just pile up on me. And everybody's looking at me going, what's wrong with this guy? How come he can't figure this stuff out? It's astonishingly difficult to solve. Right? So I needed that broken down to me so I didn't just breeze through that. And then it goes on. It says frothy emotional appeal. Next paragraph says frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. And people often confuse this and wonder what frothy emotional appeal is. And they think that it's me, the alcoholic, talking to my wife it's not. Frothy emotional appeal is my friends and family and other people telling me. Frothy emotional appeal is the judge saying, hey, if I see you in my courtroom again, you're going inside. It's my doctor saying, you've got to stop drinking. Your liver's failing. It's the wife saying, if you don't stop, I'm taking the kids and I'm leaving and I'm not coming back. It was my 13-year-old son looking at me saying, Dad, please, don't leave me alone tonight. It seldom suffices. It doesn't say never. Sometimes it does. Sometimes he'd look at me like that and I might stay home. No. And it goes on, the very next sentence is, the message that can interest these men must have depth and weight. And that depth and weight comes from the wreckage of my past. From me sitting down with another man saying, look, this is who I was. I was a man who lived in absolute disregard for the welfare of everyone around me. And this is who I am today. That's depth and weight. And that's how it needs to be broken. That's how, not everybody can break it down that way. I do believe that God gave me a gift, and I'm very passionate about this book, and because what it did for me, and I'm very passionate about sharing it. And I just love this platform to be able to do that. Damn.
I know.
Well,
I think that really, it changes a lot of things for me because I obviously am not an addict or alcoholic, and I've never gone through the steps, and I'm excited to watch, to listen, to learn. it gives me perspective too, because I get pushback all the time from patients poking holes in the program saying, AA doesn't work for me. I don't need that. I've tried it. I've relapsed it. And it just puts more perspective for me as a physician and how to approach patients differently and how to speak to them differently and try to engage them as to like, what did they go through? How did they go through it? Because clearly there's a whole different level that's out there. And I think too, from a family member perspective, like being a daughter of someone who suffered addiction, it is helping me see, and it's helping me see the guilt and the shame. Like it never goes away from your perspective or my perspective. But in a sense, it's healing because I can, on some level, connect with you. Though I'm not an addict or alcoholic, I'm able to connect with you on that level now.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty awesome.
It's awesome. I think one of the beautiful things that this program does, and the program doesn't exist without this literature, and I believe that this is what separates Alcoholics Anonymous from every other program out there, is the literature. I believe, and this is just my opinion, that this was divinely inspired. And for me to be able to, I was on a podcast one time and the guy asked me, for me to be able to live in the world with the wreckage I've created, and we all have different levels of it, but you just mentioned shame, right? And for me to be able to live, I still live in the same area that I grew up in. I see the same people. So how do I do that? How do I walk around with this stuff? I've done some pretty bad things in my life. When we do the 9th step, it's not about forgiveness, it's about justice. And what this program does, because of that psychic change, because the way I live my life now, is it brings justice to it. And so I'll give you an example. I was on a podcast one time, and it was a therapist, and he asked me, well, how did you forgive yourself for all the stuff you did? He said, because I usually see the people who, once they forgive themselves and they go on. He said, how did you ever forgive yourself for all that stuff? The violence, the stealing, the fighting, hurting my mother and the people that I hurt emotionally. And I said, I don't think about that. That to me, that's like a get out of jail free card. I don't think about it. But what I do through this program, through sponsoring men, through taking people through this book, through sharing what the process with them is, I can take that stuff, the harm that I've caused, the damage I've caused. I can take the bad stuff I've done to hurt people, and I use it to help the next person. And hopefully, over time, the good that I'm doing with it over here begins to outweigh the harm that I've caused with it. That's justice. The principle behind the 9th step, which is the step that sends us out into the world to live as free and sober men and women. The principle behind that step is not forgiveness. It's justice. It's how do I make it right? And that's really the psychic change. Look, I can tell, and it's when I talk about being a process, I can tell you the day my son was born. I can tell you the day that my wife passed away. I can tell you the day I got sober, tell you the day I graduated high school, all that stuff. I cannot tell you the day that the most significant event in my life took place, and that was that psychic change that freed me. But it happened. Without a doubt, it happened. It happened in the process of these 12 steps somewhere.
Well, Erik, I can't stress enough how excited I am to be able to do this.
Me too.
Let's wrap this up, shall we?
We shall.
That was put very well. And so again, if this is something that you're interested in, go to realrecoverytalk.com/bigbookstudy and register. I'm expecting a lot of people. I'm hoping to have all the technical stuff figured out by the time this time comes. So again, January 6th, 5:00 p.m. Eastern time. RealRecoveryTalk.com/Big Book Study to register. Erik, appreciate you. Dr. T, appreciate you. Again, love the socks. And yeah, that's it. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. That is it for this episode of Real Recovery Talk. Thank you for tuning in. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach us, info@realrecoverytalk.com. Again, that's info@realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message. That is it. We will see y'all later.